Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the Liverpool Echoes Blood Red podcast. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. And who else could host the podcast on today of all days but myself, the namesake, Patrick Smith. It hasn't been the greatest week, shall we say, for the mighty Liverpool Football Club, but let's reflect on that time and then look forward to the next couple of months, shall we? As ever, joining me today, we have Ian Doyle. Doyle, how did you find Madrid?
I used a map. No, it was okay. Yeah, it was warmer than it was here. Let's put it that way. So I was quite pleased with that. So the weather was good. Obviously, I went to Lisbon. I went to Lisbon as well for the youth league. I also went to Bournemouth last week. So that's 3 games, miles away, all 1-0 defeats. Brilliant.
Very exciting. You're better than the map joke there, Dolly. Come on, you're better than that.
Well, I was gonna do the sack Patrick's Day because obviously Vieira went, but that's been done. You know, what time is it now? About 3:30. So it's been done for about 7 or 8 hours now. So not that I'm saying we should sack you.
I mean, my working day isn't done yet, Dolly. Is that? Am I going to get a little letter in the post?
Depends how good this pod is.
I'll storm out the pod halfway through, shall I? Anyway, we've also got women's football expert Beth Lindop alongside us. Welcome back, Beth.
Thank you very much. Quite glad to have a break from Liverpool Football Club this weekend, I've got to say, after the last 7 days, but I'm sure we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very timely break, I think, isn't it? And rounding off this classic panel, we're finding some consistency as a 4, aren't we, Rich, actually? Kind of a bit like the Liverpool back 4, although they've conceded goals in the past 2 games, so maybe not so.
Yeah, it's a bit like a reverse version of the Cause, isn't it? Except you've got 3 blokes and 1 female singer. So
be careful. I wondered where that was going then. Just be careful there.
You can edit things, it's fine. No, it's nice to see you all. We shouldn't be too downbeat about Liverpool's current troubles because there are bigger problems in life, so we can chew the fat instead.
Yeah, absolutely that. Well, that's our panel, everyone. So let's get into today's show. As Richard's touched you there, this could become more of a therapy session, shall we say, listeners. For those pessimists among you, watch your mood change come the end of the pod. I'm sure it will. Doyle, let's start with you then. As I mentioned, you were in Madrid at the Bernabeu. It was an expectedly strong performance from the reigning European champions and probable favourites. But how did you think Liverpool have actually played? You've had a couple of days now to dwell over it. You know, the narrative was obviously they had to chase that comeback. But they weren't terrible in every aspect of the game, were they?
I don't think Real Madrid were even that good, to be honest. I think the game just kind of like died after about an hour, didn't it? When Liverpool realised they were never going to score 3, and they kind of lost a bit of heart. I mean, Liverpool had. I know Alisson made 2 very good saves in the first half, but I'm not sure whether it came across on television. He made another 2 saves, which they were offside. He made really good saves. And I don't know whether, because the game played on, and I don't know whether or not you saw on television that the flag had gone up and the referee just allowed it to go. So it made it look as though he'd actually made more saves than he actually had, but he still made 2 cracking saves. But Courtois made about 2 or 3 in the first half. So Liverpool had the chances. You know, Nunez had a couple. Gakpo had 1. Jota had not entirely sure what he was trying to do with that kind of volley thing. I mean, we were sat miles away from the pitch, so you'll have to tell me if I'm getting any of these wrong. I mean, maybe Real Madrid have the shots, it was that far away. But the Bernabeu, interesting stadium. I went in 2009, was it 2008 or 9? I can't remember which year it was. 2009. I went in 2009 when Liverpool won, and it was decent then, but we went past it in 2020 when Liverpool played Atletico Madrid, and we went to go and do the tour actually before the game, and it wasn't on. It was a building site then, and it's 3 years down the line. It still is. And it's even probably say it's even worse. So, I mean, if it was quicker doing my back garden, that took them absolutely months. I mean, so come on, they need to get a move on with that. But the game itself, I saw somebody say something that said, this is the one thing that Liverpool have just not been in the Champions League and the Euro Club, and this is boring. It was boring to watch. And I think paralysed because, let's put it this way. If that's the first leg and Liverpool lose 1-0 and play like that, everybody's like, sound, great. And then in the second leg, they go 2-0 up after 20 minutes. Everyone's like, well, this is amazing. But obviously it doesn't work like that. The whole game was coloured by the fact that it was, Real Madrid were 5-2 up after the first game. And for all that talk of like, oh, let's do another Barcelona, it's like, well, come on, that was at Anfield against Barcelona. Had already been dumped out the previous year by Roma by collapsing in the same manner. Real Madrid do the opposite. They kind of like either fall behind or then have a wobble and go behind and just come back. So there was never any chance of them getting it wrong. I just think it was just probably just one of those games that Liverpool just had to get out of the way. I mean, as long as they didn't get absolutely tonked, that sounds a very negative thing to say, because you look at the attacking team that they put out there, they could have easily just got thrashed in the first half, but they didn't. And as I say, the second half, they couldn't really bring any more meaningful attackers on because they were all on to start with. And they'd lost Henderson and Bajcetic, so that, they lost most of the midfield, what would have probably been the likely starting midfield. So just one of those, I'm afraid, which is probably not what anybody wants to hear. They want to hear me lambasting Liverpool for having the temerity to lose to the European champions yet again. But, they're the world champions as well, so technically the best team in the world. So, just one of those, as they say.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It was really flat, wasn't it? I think is the word. But that's why I wanted to sort of credit Real Madrid, because they didn't let it become that game where Liverpool could come back into it. Very professional, composed performance from the world champions, as you say, expectedly. So, I mean, Beth, what was your take on it? The thing that I suppose you could be critical of there is there was a sort of patience about Liverpool, wasn't there, in their game? There wasn't any urgency. I mean, there's been calls throughout the week that, while they've kept calm, and obviously amazing professionals, supporters kind of want to see them take some risks, don't they? And, take a risky ball, try and beat a man, play some dangerous football. And it was just a very flat performance, wasn't it?
It was. And I mean, I think Ancelotti said in his press conference before the game that, in a sense, not that it was easier for Liverpool. Obviously, Real Madrid had a huge advantage, but in terms of Liverpool knew what they had to do. They had to go there and score 3 goals. So tactically for Real Madrid, it was a bit more difficult to sort of fathom how to play it. And I suppose, in a sense, Liverpool knew as soon as Real Madrid scored, it was game over completely. They weren't going to come back and score 4. So it was almost like they were weighing up how fast do we start this game. Do we go sort of completely gung-ho in the first 20 minutes and get an early goal, but then you risk being counted on. And we saw early on, Vinicius sort of did Trent a couple of times, didn't he, going forward and looks a real threat. So I think, at half time, as Doyle said, if we hadn't have had that absolute capitulation at Anfield, you would say it was probably quite a professional away performance to go away to the Bernabeu and be playing the reigning European champions. I thought after the first 20 minutes, Liverpool defensively did okay. And obviously, Alisson made a couple of brilliant stops as well. But then as soon as it gets to the second half, you do have to start taking some risks then. You're not going to score 3 goals in 5 minutes, are you? So you need to they needed to start the second half stronger than they did. And I think it was, maybe that was the mindset they came out with. And then as soon as it got sort of 10, 15 minutes into that second half, and that hadn't proved the case, it felt like the body language maybe just sort of dropped a little bit, and you could tell there was maybe a little bit of dejection. And it was one of them, that they just had to get to the end of the game and ensure they weren't humiliated. And it was a bizarre decision, I think, to sub Darwin Núñez off. I mean, again, I'm not sure that would have made a massive difference in the in the grand scheme of things, but he's someone, explosive, his pace and a bit unpredictable, which I think, as soon as Harvey Elliott came on, and the game just sort of died, as you said. And, I don't think that the result was too surprising or the frustrating thing, but, Liverpool's season has lurched from sort of the sublime to the ridiculous, hasn't it? So many times this season that there was sort of at the beginning of the game, you thought maybe, just maybe, it could be another special European night, but this side, they're so hard to predict. And I think all in all, it wasn't a horrendous performance considering the quality of the opposition, but obviously nowhere near enough to get back in the tie.
Yeah, it's just that unpredictability again. The pod before the match, we were previewing it, we were talking about whether Liverpool could get the comeback or if Real Madrid would batter them. No one really saw the little 1-0 win coming, even though that's the most obvious answer, because Liverpool have been such a strange team this season, haven't they? I mean, Rich, what's your take on the whole thing? I mean, do you question the substitution of Darwin Núñez? There's a few questionable decisions made around the team. I mean, are there any positives that you've taken from the match?
I don't know about positives. They've lost another game 1-0, albeit against considerably better opposition than Bournemouth. I did predict 3-3, which proves I've been drinking heavily through the weeks by the looks of things. But thankfully, not really the case. But it didn't go as I hoped. I think it's probably deep down, it's probably gone exactly as I expected, but not how I'd hoped. And you've got to football's all about hope, isn't it? You've got to take that into any situation, because if you just go into something just resigned to defeat, then it becomes a pointless process, doesn't it? It's supposed to be a pastime that people enjoy. And just on the terms of the Núñez substitution, I didn't think it was a bit of a surprise, but I think it's only really become a massive talking point because there isn't that many talking points. You know what I mean? It's the game was done and dusted at Anfield. They've conceded 5 goals after being 2-0 up at Anfield. That's not smart in any sort of situation, isn't it? And you've basically given yourself an impossible task. It would have been a miracle if they'd come back from that. I did confidently say the other week that if Liverpool got through, I'd come on this podcast in a wetsuit. And I can tell you that is still folded up in my carrier bag in the wardrobe from the last time I went to Cornwall. There's no danger of that coming out. So, I'm not so bothered about that substitution, to be honest with you. We scored the same amount of goals with men on the pitch and off. So I wouldn't get hung up on that. As soon as I saw Liverpool's lack of midfield options and the reality came to hit that they actually were going to go with 2 in midfield, I just felt I just got no chance. You know what I mean? It's your classic sensible soccer formation, that isn't a 4-2-4, very attacking. But it might work against some teams. It'd be a surprise if it worked against a team as streetwise and savvy as Real Madrid. So, unfortunately, as positive as I may have been, I say positive, I predicted the draw. But, goals, I wanted to see goals. As positive as I was about seeing an entertaining football match, as soon as I saw how limited or hamstrung they were in midfield, I started to think differently, and unfortunately, that's how it played out.
These two have no idea what sensible soccer is.
I was going to say, Rich, you have to explain to me what is sensible soccer.
Oh my God!
It's a computer game from about 30 years ago that was very, very straightforward but very successful because it was dead easy to play.
Sensible soccer is probably the greatest computer game of all time.
And you could kill the ball, which you couldn't do in any other football game before that. So everyone was like, wow, like in Brazilian.
This is before you had FIFA and all that was the game to play. It was highly addictive and ruined my time in college, but that's a different story.
I've got to say as well, not on the sensible soccer subject, by the way.
I'm going to jump in there, Beth.
That's right over my head.
Are you pro Evo FIFA?
Yeah. I did think it was interesting after the game, some of the comments that came out from Alisson, where he came out and he said, when I would go into the Bernabeu and wearing the Liverpool shirt, I've got to give my best. And I think he said, he thought he could hold his head up high, and he'd done that, which, absolutely I agree. He had a great game, really. But he did say there was a lack of attitude on our part. And I thought that was really, really interesting to hear a Liverpool player say that, because that's been something that's been levelled at Liverpool in the media a lot this season. Has the desire been the same? Has the attitude been lacking a little bit? So for a senior player to come out and acknowledge that, that's interesting, and maybe an indication of the mindset maybe isn't right from some players. And I think that's probably where the frustration came from a lot of Liverpool fans. Was it looked at times that, not that they didn't care, but, that they weren't going sort of, flat out to try and turn it around, or at least get a goal or do something. And I thought it was interesting to hear Alisson sort of acknowledge that after the game.
No, absolutely right. I mean, I think it's naive to criticize, professional elite players' psychology at times. But then also on the flip side of it, Liverpool never really looked like scoring at the Bernabeu. Granted, you're 3-0, 3 goals down to Real Madrid away from home. Your heads probably will start to drop. But I felt the same at Bournemouth as well. And it was what I was saying before about that patience they have. They seem really patient in their build-up. There's no urgency. At Bournemouth, they had a good, 10, 15 minutes towards the end. They were seemingly just going back and forward, putting it into the box to no avail. There's no real desire and urgency there. It's a really strange one. Honestly, I don't want to criticise the players too much on that, because they know a lot more than I will in that sense. But Doyle, someone who got a lot of criticism as well was Trent Alexander-Arnold. Jamie Carragher on CBS's coverage had a bit of a dig, didn't he? Let's put it nicely.
No, not really. He didn't get criticism from the Liverpool Echo, I would like to point out. Because
not from the Liverpool Echo, yeah, exactly. No. But Jamie Carragher gave him some advice, I'll say. And he also recommended that Liverpool, needed another right-back to challenge him for his place. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think he does need some competition? And, do you think he has been lacklustre this season?
I don't think it's been as bad as people say. I mean, there's been spells where he's been the best player. Certainly at the start of this year, he was the one whose attitude actually was good when everybody else's was bad. But then he had that one bad game. I think it was Brighton away and probably the FA Cup where he got subbed and then he wasn't very happy at being subbed. And he is happy at being subbed. Well, apart from Winston Bohard, if you remember him, he just never wanted to play for Chelsea. But yeah, I don't think he's been awful. I just think it's obviously not been his best form. But what you would say about Trent is that he plays in a team that's technically built around him. And then when you get all the bits taken out of it, or around him that help him out, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for him because he's an attack-minded fullback who's not a defence-minded fullback. Doesn't mean he can't defend. He was up against Vinicius, who's Carlo Ancelotti believes he's the best player in the world. So I don't think you should be like having a go at somebody for like, oh, why didn't you stop him? This best player in the world. Come on, it's like Messi going past you when he was at his pomp, or Ronaldo, or insert name of the player that you thought was quite good but probably isn't really. For those 10 minutes. So. I'm not going to have too much of a go at him. I don't think Carragher was having a go at him, to be fair. I think he was just saying he needs a bit of help, which is probably right. And in terms of the right back, well, they bought one in Calvin Ramsey, who knows what he's like because no one's ever seen him play and he's been injured. There are other right back options. James Milner, who was playing central midfield and is about as old as I am. And then the other one is Joe Gomez, who I actually think... Bear in mind, it was 5 years ago when Trent got into the team. It was Trent and Joe Gomez who were competing to be the right back in that team in 2018 when they got to the Champions League final. I think Gomez got injured against Stoke towards the end of the season. That meant that Trent stayed in, and that's why he ended up playing all the games, and he's gone on from there. So Gomez can do a job, but in terms of getting a right back, I wouldn't say it's a priority. But you've got to get 2 or 3 midfielders, probably a centre back, and I wouldn't buy a forward, but if they're looking at getting one in, they might want it because Firmino's going. So. I don't think right back is an important. But again, look at Andy Robertson, Tsimikas. I think the first season he barely played, did he? Second season, he puts Robertson under a bit of pressure, and that's kind of carried on this season. I don't think Tsimikas has been great this season, but Robertson has been probably one of Liverpool's better outfield players, certainly this year since the turn of the year. And that's because Tsimikas is there putting him, keeping him on his toes. And let's not forget, Tsimikas scored the winner in an FA Cup final last year. So. If Liverpool can find a right back or one of the right backs that they've got available there already, well, admittedly, I can't ever imagine Joe Gomez ever taking a penalty or having a shot on goal, to be honest. He's never scored.
He's never scored for Liverpool, no.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, I can see, I'm not getting on board. I mean, I wrote a piece yesterday. I'm not jumping on the Trent bandwagon of just having a go at him. I think there's a little bit of what Rich said. There's nothing happened in the game, so let's criticise Klopp for subbing Nunes, which, to be fair, I did think was a bit odd. As in the substitution, not the criticism. And I'll then have a go at Trent, because why don't we just have a go at Trent? Because everyone has a go at Trent because he's a unique kind of footballer. Some people like Klopp see him as this person that can get lots out of and build a team around him. Some people like Gareth Southgate and certainly Steve Holland, his assistant manager, haven't got a clue what to do with him, and so just don't pick him.
Yeah, nicely put there, Doyle. I think the point you made as well about Kostas Tsimikas, whilst he puts pressure on Andy Robertson, he also allows Robertson to be rested, whereas Trent, doesn't really get arrested. The only reason Trent doesn't play is when he's injured.
Trent looks tired. It was interesting against Bournemouth when Milner came on for the last 20 minutes, half an hour. Milner was suddenly getting in behind and running. It's like, again, Milner, who's about as old as my dad, he comes on and he does, he makes a positive difference that Trent should be making. Because Trent's probably just a bit tired. Yeah. Milner won the penalty, didn't he, for Jota? So, yeah. I think he's just a bit tired, and perhaps not playing for England over the next couple of weeks will help him because he can just have a bit of a rest.
Yeah,
reminds me a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you again. Reminds me a little bit of 2 years ago when Liverpool were struggling, and Trent hadn't had a great start to the calendar year. I think it's 2021, and then they had a little break. He came back, and I think he scored a last-minute winner against Aston Villa, 2-1 at home in front of that mega crowd of nobody, and there was still a coronavirus thing. And from that moment on, Liverpool won most of the games and ended up finishing third. So I think everybody would settle for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the point is Trent. The only reason Trent doesn't play often is if he's injured, or if he's got a slight problem. But the criticism of him, it sort of snowballs, doesn't it? I thought he played pretty well against Real Madrid, given, as you said, he's marking Vinicius Junior, one of the most dangerous wingers in the world. He did a pretty good job, and he still managed at times to go forward and try and make something happen. And then all it takes is one mistake to get past once. And the social media bandwagon jumps on him, and then the heat just starts increasing on him. It's such a toxic cycle, I think. But yeah, I don't think Trent's the problem by any mean. I mean, Beth, we mentioned there the midfield cover isn't as good as it should be. Let's be honest. That's got to be affecting Trent's game, hasn't it? I mean, do you think that's the solution to getting the best out of him again?
I think it's the solution to getting the best out of the team again, to be honest. I think, all season that's been the biggest issue. And I think the fact, obviously, it was a real blow for Bajcetic to be out of that game. And I think it speaks volumes that, the fan base were devastated that an 18-year-old who was playing, under 18s football not too long ago was sort of our only hope, really, of getting a result against Real Madrid. And he's had I think the injury is an adductor injury, is it, like a stress reaction or something like that, which you wonder how much of that is down to how much he's been playing. And so yeah, I think definitely, I think that's the point Jamie Carragher was trying to make, is that when Liverpool are dominant and they're attacking and they're having most of the ball, then that's when Trent excels, and he's given a license to get forward a little bit more, and he's afforded more time on the ball. And I think, obviously, if you get the midfield right and he's got players who can fill in and have the wherewithal to sort of drop back and slot into that right back role when he goes on one of his sort of marauding runs forward, then that's obviously when he's going to be at his best. But I think that's the key, isn't it? That's the massive job that Liverpool's recruitment team need to do in the summer. They have to get these midfield signings right. And I know Jurgen Klopp quite often likes to take time to bed his new signings in. We saw it with Fabinho and Andy Robertson a little bit. He likes to take his time to get them adjusted, but we need players that are going to come in and make an instant impact. And I think that's why, it's so crucial that the 2-3 midfielders that they bring in the summer are the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Rich, as Beth was mentioning there, Stefan Bajcetic as well, the injury he's got out for the season, that's going to be such a huge miss for them in that run, isn't it, in the top 4 race, because he's been such an important player, such a young man, the energy he brought, bringing back the pressing, taking risks, as I mentioned. He was one who'd bomb forward and press and, get the team up the pitch. He's going to be a huge loss to them at the end of the season running, isn't he?
Well, he is, but he wasn't in the mix at the start of the season. So, the fact that he's not there at the end doesn't really bode too well on the actual planning in the midfield department, does it? You know what I mean? He wouldn't have been an automatic selection at the start of the season, and yet he's absolutely in that picture now. But you've got more or less the same players, but with players coming in and out injured. So it's tricky. I mean, how long are we looking on Thiago? Do we know how many weeks is he away from the return?
Should be back after international break, but only training, maybe not playing straight away. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Getting back to match fitness and going back in. So there's a few problems there, and obviously he's been a bit of a breath of fresh air, hasn't he, with that energy and drive, and the fact that he loves to put a tackle in, which I'll always be a fan of. That is going to be a miss. But Harvey Elliott has always been available, and I think, and I have been critical of him at times throughout the season for various reasons, more to do with his actual effectiveness in game rather than his attitude, which has been spot on as far as I'm concerned. But it's a chance for him to show what he can do, and maybe try and hold down a place himself. Just on Trent, is there any argument at all for trying him in midfield? Does that? I know it's been talked about many times over the years, but is there any way that, or any period between now and the end of the season where Jurgen Klopp might think, is it worth me having a look just to see, with the situation I've got in midfield, whether he could come in and do a job, and if it did work out, could that save him a few quid?
I don't know who you're putting the right back, Rich.
James Milner. No, you're right. You can.
That's
you
the
can
problem. He sort of has to play there, doesn't he?
Well, you can have Milner or you can have Gomez. Unfortunately, you haven't got Calvin Ramsey, have you?
Yeah.
And he is still. He's played once, hasn't he, against Derby County, and I very much like the look of what I've seen of him at Aberdeen from videos. But when he played against Derby, he looked fairly nervous to me, which shows he's probably got a bit, not like a Ben Doak who just looks absolutely fearless and you can just throw into a lion's den. He's probably going to need a few games to be able to be at the right level. But I'm just maybe if it's not just between now and the end of the season, but in terms of before the start of next season, is there any argument there for giving him a go in midfield?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, there certainly is the shout for it, but I think the main thing with Trent is, sorting out the midfield, bringing some stability back to it, and then trying to bring the best out of him. Get the Liverpool team at the pitch, bring some energy into that midfield, and that gives Trent more of a license to roam forward, I'm hoping. Dolly, then, in terms of the top four race, the wider picture, it's obviously not been a great week for Liverpool. Following the United game, it was almost, Liverpool close to the top four. They could have moved into it if they'd have beaten Bournemouth. It was all very optimistic. And now, once again, we're finding ourselves being very pessimistic. What do you think they need to change in the last 2 months then to get themselves into the top four? What would you like to see Liverpool try and do to improve their performances?
Win some games.
Elaborate on that.
No, I know it sounds flippant, but that is actually, it doesn't matter. Anything else is irrelevant now. They've got 12 games left, which is still almost a third of a season. So, and I think this is why I've been banging on about this for months, and say this now is the period where Liverpool have to get going. The only problem they've got is that the three hardest games are the first three that they've got coming up, and they're all played in the same week. So Klopp said after the game in Madrid in the Bernabeu on Wednesday, he said, "Look, it's a defining week for our season, then we'll know what we can go for." I don't necessarily agree with him, because if Liverpool, let's just say for argument's sake, Liverpool lose all those three games against City away, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, then they win the other 9. I think they have a very good chance of finishing the top 4. But obviously, you'd have lost 5 games in a row going into those 9 games, so probably don't want to be doing that. I think it is just win. It is win because that'll breed confidence, because they have written something today and not worked out, showed I had an ability to count. They said that Liverpool have only won 5 games in 15 this year, which I thought was pretty remarkable when you think that they had that little run of 13 points from 15. The only other game they've won in that time was at Wolves in the FA Cup, the game that everybody remembers on telly for not the football. We didn't
the Harvey Elliott screamer.
We didn't even get to hear that in the ground. We didn't even get to hear it. So we didn't even get the fun bit of the entire evening. We didn't even get to see that. Anyway,
you missed out there, Doyle.
I'm going to say, is that going to be the highlight of Liverpool season there? I mean, it's got to be up there, hasn't it? Yeah. So winning will give confidence going into those games. There are some hard games in those last 9. I'm looking at Tottenham at home. That's going to be a tricky one. They've tended to, especially when you consider that those 2 teams, you'd like to think by that point are the ones going for it. Newcastle's still in it, but you do wonder whether or not they've got enough goals. Even the wins that they're getting lately, they're just kind of stumbling over the line. So that would be my concern over Newcastle. Brighton, I know they won in midweek. Have they got the squad? Not entirely sure. Although, let's put it this way. If Brighton get into 4th place ahead of Liverpool, I would not be overly bothered, in the sense that, well played, Brighton. They're a good team. They got a good manager. He's a manager I think we should keep an eye on in terms of when Liverpool are coming to, replace Jurgen Klopp. He's somebody I think. What I quite like what he said. He said, I can't remember whether I said this on the podcast the other week or what, but there was a report where he said that he was disappointed with the Brighton. Not disappointed, but he was a little bit frustrated that Brighton didn't put some more money to the transfer window in January, because he wanted to aim for the top 4. That's the Brighton manager. So it's like he was that ambitious with Brighton. Yeah. What's he going to be like when he goes to one of the no disrespect to Brighton, one of the big clubs? So that's he played the game a certain way. So Brighton will be there and thereabouts because they can score goals. But I do think it's between Liverpool and Tottenham. How close Liverpool can be will be settled in these 3 games. How much they've got to do. But what would you? Okay, I'll ask everybody here a question then. Those 3 games, what would you just say was a good points tally from those 3 games? Without saying 9, it's like what would you accept as a good point?
5, I think. 5 or 6.
So that's a win and 2 draws. So beat Arsenal and 2 draws away from home.
Yeah.
Okay, Rich.
I think 4. If they can get 4 from these 3 games and then pretty much win all of the rest, then I think they get top 4.
I'd go along with that. I think anything less than 4 is a struggle. You can just
the only one
except 4.
That they need to win in the top 4 race, technically in that sense, is Chelsea is the one that they can't afford to let Chelsea gain points on. It doesn't really matter if City and Arsenal extend the lead.
How far they are behind. They're still 5 points behind Chelsea with the same games. Rich, what do you think?
I think 6.
You think you need 6?
Yeah, I think you need 6. And the reason for that is, and I've done a couple of little calculations down here, Liverpool are averaging 1.6 points, 1.61 points a game. Spurs are averaging 1.7, Newcastle 1.76, and I didn't get around to doing Brighton's. But it's slightly better than Liverpool's, I can tell you. And when someone else speaks, I'll work it out. But you need, really, to finish in the top 4, you need to be averaging 2 points per game. 2 points per game, you qualify for the Champions League. No question about it, okay? So you've got 3 tough games. And if you take a point from each, it's not enough, is it? But if you take 2 points from each, it is enough. So, and bear in mind, they've got to make up a bit of ground as well. I think you need to be averaging that 2 points a game, and therefore you need 6 points from the 3 matches, even though the opposition are obviously of a decent ilk.
Yeah, but Liverpool this season have done well in those big matches, haven't they, Beth? I mean, when it's come to those big occasions, they've beaten City, they beat Spurs away, they beat United 7-0. I mean, those 3 matches, strangely, you wouldn't be surprised, Liverpool go and win in those 3 and then lose to Leeds the week after, would you? The way this season's been going. I mean, they really turn it on for those big matches, don't they?
They do. I was going to say that. I would not be surprised if they win all 3 and then lose to the likes of Leeds and Southampton, because that, as I say, the season has gone from the sublime to the ridiculous on so many occasions this season. So, yeah, I think that again comes back to sort of the attitude thing. Is was there an element of Liverpool going to Bournemouth last weekend and thinking, we're going to win this game, we've just beat United 7-0, we don't really need to get out of first gear, and they were punished for that. I'm not saying that was the case, but that's how it felt, certainly at times in the game, when they were just sort of knocking it round the back, and you're thinking, you need a little bit more urgency. So, as you say, for these big games, they really seem to get up for them and almost sort of relish that opportunity to be the underdog, I guess. I think, when they've gone into games against, no offence, but lowlier opposition, they've almost sort of, they've been outplayed and outfought. And I think maybe if they go into Manchester City and Arsenal, especially, that those games, that they're not going to be the favourites. So that could well play a part, I think. And the thing with Liverpool is they've done it before, and we know what they're capable of, despite the fact that, on the form this season, you wouldn't back them to finish in the top 4 because they've not been capable of stringing more than, 3 or 4 wins together at a time. But, if you go back to that sort of 2021 season when they were sort of decimated, and again, it was as Doyle said, I think that Aston Villa win, and then after that they won 9 or 10 games on the spin. So we know that this squad can do that, but it's just because they haven't looked like the Liverpool of old this season. You question whether they maybe have lost that ability to go on a run. So I suppose only time will tell.
Yeah, I think those big 3 games, they really could be a catalyst for that end of season run. If they do come out of it with hopefully 6 points, as Rich said, maybe even 9 points, it could be absolutely massive for their just confidence boosting for the end of the season. Beth, I'll stay with you though, because there's another big game, isn't there? A week today, actually, next Friday, Women's Merseyside derby. I mean, there's some Liverpool action, everyone, during the international break. Make sure you don't miss that. What are Liverpool's hopes going into it? I know the Everton women's team are a pretty decent side, aren't they? It's not been great for Liverpool side in the WSL as of late. Are you expecting anything from that one?
Yeah, I'm hoping it should be a good game, really. I mean, Liverpool had a massive win last time out against Tottenham. Tottenham were, I think, 2 points below them going into that game, and it almost felt like if they didn't win it, Liverpool, that they were going to get dragged back into sort of that relegation sort of dogfight, and it sort of felt like it could be one of those days. They went behind quite early on after spurning a couple of good chances, and they did well. Liverpool, they battled back, they won it 2-1, and they were sort of they had to hang on a little bit toward the end, but they did, and it's a massive 3 points. So I think now, I spoke to Missy Kearns after that game, and she said now we can start looking up the table, and I think they can. I think that's sort of a bit of a weight off the shoulders, really. I think on form, and in terms of when you look at the course of the season, I'd still probably back Everton to maybe get the win. I mean, they beat Liverpool 3-0 in the reverse fixture at Anfield earlier in the season. So, if it's anything like that game, then it could be pretty messy for Liverpool. But I think they've maybe learnt some lessons from that one, and hopefully it should be a good crowd there as well, and a good occasion. So, whatever the result, I think it'll be an entertaining game, and hopefully plenty of goals. Although now I've said that's probably going to be a goalless result, so don't count on me for advice.
Yeah, it's a nice big occasion for them, isn't it? I suppose the Liverpool team, they're in good form, aren't they? Sort of got nothing to lose now going into it. You never know in a derby match as well, so hopefully they can go there and get a result against Everton in the Women's Merseyside derby. But we'll wrap up the pod there, everyone. There's certainly plenty to look forward to over the international break, despite it being a relatively disappointing week, should we say, for Liverpool. Hopefully your moods have lifted through this podcast, mine certainly have. It's good to debrief and talk through everything, I suppose, of Liverpool's recent performances. Listeners and viewers, it's going to be a very long time until we see Liverpool in action again, but don't worry, we're going to give you your Liverpool fix all the way through the international break with our daily podcasts and multiple daily videos right here on the Blood Red channel, on whichever platform you get your podcasts from. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. But for now, thank you so much for joining myself, Patrick Smith, Ian Doyle, Beth Lindop, and Rich Garnett on the Blood Red podcast. We'll catch you again soon.